There's a lot of issues, but the good news is that Ethereum has many very large and very talented dev teams, and so there's a lot of people working very hard at solving those problems. A little bit closer to the user, well, much closer to the user, is account abstraction. So account abstraction is basically a set of standards that makes it much easier to use smart contract wallets for regular users. And the smart contract wallets basically mean that instead of a key controlling your account, you have a program control your account. There's two big reasons to do this. There's convenience-related reasons and there's security-related reasons. The easiest to understand convenience-related reason is being able to pay fees with ERC20 tokens. So for example, if you create a new account for the first time and you receive 100 USDC and you have no ETH, you only have the USDC, it would be nice if you could send a transaction and be able to use that USDC to pay some of the transaction fees. And there's also sponsored transactions, being able to pay fees on behalf of other users. So both of those are convenience objectives. On the security side, so I personally have talked a lot about social recovery wallets and multi-sig wallets, just as a way of making it easier for regular users to have an experience which is both secure and decentralized at the same time. Right, so this is one of those balances where I think Ethereum can really provide, or is really in a good position to provide, right? Because like account infrastructure in Web 2 is completely centralized, and you know, individual providers like Google or Twitter or whoever else basically have complete control over your account. They can take it away from you, they can shut it down, they can take it over, and also they have access to all of your data. And the kind of early Web3 approach was to basically go all the way to the other extreme and say there is a 12-word passphrase, and that 12-word passphrase is the only thing that controls the account. If you have it, you control it. If you lose it or it gets stolen, then you permanently lose control of your account. And social recovery wallets and multi-sig wallets are an attempt to create a compromise between those two approaches that is still decentralized, that still maximizes the power in the hands of the user, does not create trusted centralized intermediaries, but at the same time is actually practical for regular users. Key revocation, so being able to take away power from keys that controlled your account before. This is actually the really big thing that account abstraction can do that MPC cannot do. So it's the big reason why I think we do need really account abstraction, and we can't just kind of throw up our hands and solve everything with MPC. And another big reason is also custom signature algorithms. There's two kinds of custom signature algorithms. One is if we want to use signature algorithms that are already in specific forms of trusted hardware. So for example, in many people's phones, there are trusted hardware modules that can support the SEC-P256R1 elliptic curve for signing. And if we use account abstraction, then individual wallets can design their code so that it verifies SEC-P256R1 signatures, and so we'll be able to have much more secure wallets that will just use those signatures, and so use keys inside of trusted hardware modules for security. Another big reason is quantum proofing. We already know how to create signature algorithms that are not vulnerable to quantum computers, and being able to have accounts that are controlled by a computer program, and so you can set your algorithm to whatever you want. This gives us a very nice and fast upgrade path to be able to incorporate this. Another big one is being able to do multiple operations at the same time in one transaction. So if you've done a Uniswap trade, for example, you probably have had this experience, right? You had to send one transaction to approve a token and then send another transaction to do a trade. And what a lot of applications do is they basically try to save pain for their users by doing one big approval where you approve your entire balance of the application, which is good for convenience but terrible for security. Now, if you can do multiple operations at the same time, then in one transaction, you'll be able to approve and immediately spend. And that will solve the security problem and the convenience problem at the same time. So a lot of really good stuff that can come out of account abstraction. So zooming in a little bit more to social recovery wallets and multi-sig wallets, one of the big ideas that they introduced is this concept of guardians. So there is a collection of other addresses that can recover your account or that are needed to authorize transactions for your account. And these guardians can be many kinds of things. So they can be your own devices. So you could have your phone be a guardian, a hardware wallet be a guardian, your laptop be a guardian, friends and family, so other people who have Ethereum accounts, institutional guardians, so companies that are specifically designed around being guardians, and potentially even things like email addresses. With some ZK technology and things like ZK email, you could basically turn email accounts into guardians, right? And so you can have a multi-sig wallet where the participants in the multi-sig are just all of these very diverse kinds of actors, your devices, friends, institutions, and it really, you basically get a very high level of security, but with an experience that is much easier than having to memorize a 12-word passphrase. Account abstraction is an ecosystem-wide effort, and this is one of those things that's really important to remember and really important to think about. Basically, there's a lot of different participants that will have to do something to adapt to account abstraction. So existing participants, wallets, existing applications. Applications will have to support ERC 1271, so they can support smart contract wallet signing, for example. There's many other ERCs that'll need to support developer tools. For example, in order to actually be able to do things like multiple operations within one transaction. And then there will be new kinds of participants, right? So layer twos will need to be, there's a lot of thinking about how to make account abstraction work across a cross-layer 2 context, privacy infrastructure, MEV infrastructure, builders, many different actors have some kind of a role to play in account abstraction, right? And just to kind of zoom out a bit and think about like what is the goal of all this, right? The goal of all this to me is that over the last 10 years, we've basically been building the base layer, working on the theory, really trying to make blockchains themselves as good as possible to the point where they at least work as a proof of concept. Over the next 10 years, we have to really make it work for regular users. And to make things work for regular users, there's just problems that have to be solved, right? Transaction fees being high is a problem that has to be solved. Transaction fees have to go below 5 cents per transaction, maybe even below 1 cent. Convenience, so like users should not be vulnerable to just losing their account if it gets stolen or if it gets lost. And there's no point in saying, does DeFi provide 4% APR or 6% APR if you lose your wallet, DeFi provides negative 100% APR, right? So, my vision for DeFi is basically, can we make DeFi not provide negative 100% APR? And I think, unfortunately, over the last few years, we've seen many ways in which it can sometimes provide negative 100% APR, whether it's the application itself breaking or whether it's users losing accounts, and we need to just solve both of those problems. So if we want something that is viable for regular users and at the same time is open and decentralized and doesn't just bring back all of the components that we've been trying to move beyond and get rid of, then we need to solve things like account abstraction and things like scalability to make the on-chain experience competitive with centralized services. Scaling. So the Ethereum scaling picture has definitely expanded quite a bit over the last few years. This year, rollups are really becoming mature, and we've been seeing proof systems actually start to activate. We've been seeing the power that is given to these multi-sigs that are used as emergency-backed kind of security measures in these rollups start to decrease. Decentralization improve, but there's still a long way to go. So we've also seen many different kinds of layers, right? So there's rollups, which we've talked about quite a lot. There's also intermediate layers that could exist between layer 1s and rollups. So Some people have talked about shared sequencing. Personally, I'm more interested in proof merging. So this is the idea that if you have different rollups that have different proofs, instead of submitting all of those proofs on chain, you can submit one proof on chain that represents all of those proofs and that combines all of those proofs together. So this way, it decreases the gas cost of running a rollup, and you could potentially get to rollups being able to commit to the base chain even once per slot. In addition to rollups, we also have validiums. The difference between rollups and validiums is that rollups have data on-chain, validiums have data off-chain. Rollups have higher costs, but rollups also have higher security. But there's still challenges left to go, right? So making sure proof systems, whether it's fraud proofs or validity proofs, are secure, and making sure that mechanism is decentralized, and that all of these kind of backdoor security council mechanisms do get weaker and weaker over time as we become confident enough to move beyond them. Decentralizing sequencing, the process of getting transactions included. Cross-layer 2 wallets, addresses, even address standards where, for example, the layer 2 that you're on is part of the address encoding. So this is something that the Safe wallet already does. It might be something that more wallets will have to do. And then also improving the data availability space on layer 1. So starting with the IP4844 and then expanding the amount of data offered over time. Advice for layer 2s. So there's a lot of people launching layer 2s. There's also a lot of projects that are really getting interested in becoming layer 2s. So Celo announced a few months ago that they were becoming a layer 2. There's others as well. And there's also interest in enterprise applications, somehow becoming more blockchainy, even games becoming more blockchainy. And I think this is all good. And I think it's even good to explore kind of hybrids of centralization and decentralization. Now, this is something that people tried to do in the last decade with consortium chains, but I think we found that consortium chains really did not really work well, right? I think consortium chains tried to be the best of both worlds between centralization and decentralization, and they ended up being the worst of both worlds. They neither gained the efficiencies of centralization nor the wide public acceptance of decentralization. And but I think validiums based on that are separate systems from, but that root themselves into public blockchains are another type of compromise between centralization and decentralization, and I actually think are a much better compromise. Now, how do you think about which one of these you're going to be, right? Basically, rollups are more security demanding, validiums are more scale demanding. So account key stores, for example, so a storage of like what is your the key that you used for your account across all of these layer 2s should be on a rollup. High value financial assets should be on a rollup. ENS names probably should be on a rollup. Lower value financial activity, and particularly things like exchanges where there's only a small relatively amount of coins in flight at any one time. Well, maybe it's more okay for it to be a validium. And maybe something like an exchange, especially if you want to be very high performance, it's just too hard for it to be a rollup. Tokens for centrally managed ecosystems, so loyalty points, potentially tickets and similar things. If it's scale demanding, it's totally okay for it to be a validium. Non-financial enterprise applications, things like supply chain management, should be a validium. Decentralized social media, I think usernames should probably be on a rollup. Things like badges should probably be on a rollup, but individual messages like tweets, if you're going to put them on a network at all, probably better to put them on a validium. And then games, a lot of interest in games and blockchaining, and I think it just obviously makes much more sense for them to be validiums. So an important choice to make here, and I think both ends of that spectrum are valuable. Scaling individual applications, right? So individual applications have a lot to think about in terms of scaling. So CCIP is a scaling strategy for ENS. I've talked about it a bunch. The ENS team has talked about it a bunch. Here's a diagram of it if you want to like photo it and stare at it later. But it's ENS has a path to scaling and becoming layer 2 based. and other applications need to have that kind of path too. Privacy. So privacy of coin transfers. About a month and a half ago, I wrote a paper together with Amin Soleimani and some legal academics, Javier Chair, some people from Chainalysis, basically talking about how to improve kind of regulatory compliance and reduce the ability of privacy systems to be used by bad actors at a large scale, but at the same time, avoid having any kind of backdoors and avoid compromising on privacy. So zero-knowledge proofs really give us a lot of options that we did not have before. But coin transfers are not the only thing that needs privacy. Guardians need privacy, right? So you may be okay giving your friend a share of the responsibility for protecting your account, but you may not want your friend to see all of your transactions. Privacy of identity and reputation in simple applications is also very important. So a lot of privacy challenges still left to figure out, and I think the privacy status quo of many kinds of applications is just really not good enough, and it needs to be improved. But improving the privacy status quo is going to require really re-architecting many of these things, and that's just a big challenge that we have to focus on. So conclusions, right? So keeping the base layer robust while cautiously expanding a few aspects of its capability is really important. Right, so base layer capabilities have been increasing a lot over the last 10 years. Over the next 10 years, capabilities will have to increase slowly, but robustness really needs to improve quite a lot. And the main justification to make radical changes would probably be if there is, if not making radical changes actually isn't just a decrease in functionality, but actually is a risk to things like security and decentralization, for example, right? So changes to proof of stake, good. Potentially enshrining certain things, maybe ZK EVMs, worth considering. Improving the EVM, adding things like EOF and EVM Max, definitely really worth thinking through. But making more really huge changes and turning Ethereum into a really crazy capability first thing, not really. So there's a complicated balance of making something friendly to regular users, but still providing the benefits of decentralization. And I see Ethereum as being really in a good position to compromise between these two extremes, right? As we mentioned before, we have the Web 2 centralized world that really creates these single points of centralization and single points of failure across the entire ecosystem. But then on the other side, we have this kind of very extreme approach of saying you have your 12-word passphrase, and if you lose your passphrase, you're screwed. And the blockchain is going to become super minimal, and it's going to become inconvenient to use. And I think the Ethereum community is in a good place to really still keep the values of decentralization alive and stay true to them and not sacrifice on them, but at the same time really use the powerful tools that we have to make something that is also very friendly to regular users. The tech and the ecosystem are very important, right? So none of this will happen without technology, and none of what we've had so far has happened without technology, but there's also a lot of ecosystem work that's really important here. There's a lot of work involved in understanding users, in building things that work for users, in bringing together different aspects of the community, collaborating between all kinds of different stakeholders in the ecosystem. And that is also really important, right? And there's developers of applications, wallets, core infrastructure, and all of these different actors really needs to work together to make some of these transitions work. And so that's something that I hope that everyone can really participate in, and we can get done over the next few years. So thank you.